It's 2:06 on Talk Radio 790 KABC. You're listening to the John Phillips Show. John's on vacation this week. He'll be back on Monday. So it's Randy Wang here, flying solo, broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studio. The phone number to join us is 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. You can email us at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. You could download the podcast at KABC.com. Click on podcast. Go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show. Just posted last hour with Doug McIntyre, which, by the way, he's going to be at the Grove tonight from 7 to 9 at the Barnes & Noble because his book came out, Frank Shadow. I will be there as well for at least a little bit, so come out and come say hi and support McIntyre. He provided many, 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 many years of entertainment on this radio station. So, let's all come out and celebrate Dougie. Now, one of the things that I really do enjoy about when Johnny goes on vacation and I get to sit here and do the show solo is that I can finally get through my backlog. See, every single day when I come in to do this show, I try to get here an hour and a half early. But because of traffic, it's usually like an hour 15, maybe an hour early. Sometimes I leave at 10 o'clock. I don't get here till 11:15. But I try to give myself at least an hour so I can go through, and I've got so many different things I search for. Honestly, YouTube is my whole life. It's probably why it is the number one streaming platform, because I am subscribed to every single local news channel. So I've got Fox 11, I've got ABC 7, I've got KCAL, I've got KTLA. For some reason, Channel 4 doesn't post things on YouTube anymore, so I don't use them as much. It's just faster if I get everything through YouTube. I listen to all the Bay Area stations. I listen to the Sacramento stations. I listen to the San Diego stations. And then I've also subscribed to like Gavin Newsom's account. And when Eric Garcetti was mayor of LA, his account, the city accounts. That's where I go get the city council meetings. And I'm also have keyword searches I do for everyone, including Katie Porter, including Karen Bass, including, of course, Cecily Meyer Cruz. 5 weeks! And so I'm just constantly downloading things. And I cut up as much as I can in the 90 minutes. And then I send Johnny a little email at 11:55 saying, here's what we got. And then he says, oh, what do you think we should do? So I go through it and we get to as much stuff as we can. But more often than not, we never get to half the sound I put together for this show. There's just so much going on, or we do a great hour, we're taking calls, or news breaks. So constantly things go in the backlog, and maybe we get to them, but sometimes the backlog grows exponentially. And I just filled in for Johnny in June and cleared the backlog quite a bit. But I'm here to tell you, here we are. It is July 18th, and just going back to June 21st, I have 39 raps that we haven't played. I've got several Gavin Newsom press conferences that we haven't gotten to. I've got several Karen Bass interviews that we haven't gotten to. And, of course, the other mayor that I love to follow is San Francisco Mayor London Breed.
And less tolerant of all the bullshit that has destroyed our city.
Because she's a fascinating case on what's going on right now, especially in San Francisco, where when she was elected, she is very different from the mayor she is today. She is actually taking tough positions on doing something about the drug problem and the open air drug markets in places like the Tenderloin. And she's getting a lot of political fallout from it from people like her board of supervisors who don't think we should arrest people for doing or selling drugs on the streets. So she recently sat down for an interview with a podcast. You know what? If our bookers called this a podcast, maybe more of the politicians would come on because people love doing podcasts. She sat down with the Love It or Leave It podcast, which is a guy named John Lovett, who I think used to work for Obama. Not totally sure who he is. But he got an interview with London Breed in person during Pride. And let's hear London Breed get asked about her new policy of actually arresting drug dealers, something that was not being done, especially during the Chesa Boudin days.
So you get a fair amount of criticism from the left for some of your policies around policing. You just announced a new policy around drug arrests. You've got a lot of flack for giving voice to concerns about crime that critics says that you were stoking fear for political gain. You were asked
stoking fear You know, I love when people say that crime reports are fear-mongering. No, they're actual reports of what's happening. And the fear you're hearing is the people scared because they're being victimized or they're being hurt or in some cases even being killed. So it's not fear-mongering. That's what's actually happening. Believe you me, we've all seen a slow news day where there's nothing awful to report. And that's when you start talking about how great the bloom is and you do extended reports on the weather. But no, when the crime stories are there, what are we supposed to do? Not report on them? That's the news. And if a politician is responding to those crime stories by wanting to get tougher on crime, that's not fear-mongering.
You were asked about it recently. You said, my perspective growing up in San Francisco is a lot different than the perspective of the people who have problems with my approach. I have relationships with a lot of the people who are experiencing challenges every day and suffering with addiction. Addiction is a complicated thing. It requires tough love. It requires force to a certain extent, not tolerance. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by your approach and what you think progressive critics, many of whom also work closely with the unhoused and people suffering from addiction, what do you think they miss?
So I think part of it is it's very complicated. I mean, I did grow up in San Francisco in public housing during the crack epidemic. I've had family members and friends who suffer from addiction. It was a common occurrence. And I think the difference between then and what exists now is San Francisco has invested tremendously in opportunities and programs and treatment on demand and clinics and behavioral health. And no, we don't have enough to cover the entire city, but we have enough when someone is seeking help or support in any capacity. The likelihood that we can get them help is very likely, is highly likely, and we have the resources to do it, and we're making investments. I think the challenge here is, you know, now we're saying, okay, can I help you? And sadly, in some cases, people are refusing that help. In some cases, people do accept the help, and we're able to.
Most often than not, people are refusing the help because the help is not mandatory. You know, this idea that we're going to let you languish on the street, we're going to let you destroy your life with this stuff that is slowly killing you. Even if we revive you with Narcan, the stuff is still slowly killing you. I think Dr. Drew said, you know, people that are addicted to meth that are living on the streets, they don't last more than 10 years. That stuff is debilitating every single day. And instead of forcing you off of that destructive path into a way to be cleaner, we're begging and pleading you. And London Breed has realized that's not working. And so we're spending all this money on services. You love that word, services, but people aren't taking us up on it and they're not working. So we got to do something different.
People are refusing that help. In some cases, people do accept the help and we're able to get them into treatment, but in some cases they are refusing. And then on top of that, there are, you know, and I'll tell you that I can speak to the Tenderloin directly because the people that I mostly have conversations with about what's happening in the Tenderloin actually live there. They have businesses there. And a lot of.
She does get real uppity when people from outside the city or outside the Tenderloin talk about the Tenderloin.
They have businesses there. And a lot of them are people that I actually grew up with. And many of them come to me and they're like, London, how the hell is this happening out here? We couldn't get away with this when we were growing up. And these are people who are in recovery and who are saying, why are we allowing it's not just the drug use and the drug sales. It's the violence that has happened as a result of it.
And the constituents are pissed off about it. Even in San Francisco, the average person, the politicians that you see, the nonsense people like Dean Preston, the board of supervisors, you know, they may technically represent the city, but even in San Francisco, that is not representative of the people that have to live it. Sure, if you live in one of the $1 million high rises, maybe you've got some insane ideas about how to solve the drug crisis. But the people that have to live next to it, they would like to see some arrests made.
It's not just the drug use and the drug sales. It's the violence that has happened as a result of it and wanting to see more happen. And so the reason why I'm approaching it in this way had everything to do with many of my conversations from people who are actually living in it now. I think that's the big difference because no one came to me and my family and asked me when I lived in public housing, what we wanted to see done in our community. And for me, that's where my decisions are coming from. It's not just me in a room with a couple of people saying, this is how we're going to do it. It's, well, what do you think we should do? What is happening? How do you feel about that? Well, we grew up in a time we didn't trust the police. We didn't talk to the police. We didn't engage with the police. So how is it that your stance has changed where now all of a sudden you feel like we need to do something about this? And
well, she has changed because she tried the defund the police thing and it destroyed the city. So now she's going in the other direction, but in the most San Francisco way possible. She's facing a very tough reelection because she's going hard on crime. But I love her attitude now where she don't care. She is not going to stop this.
Where now all of a sudden you feel like...
So many politicians bend at the slightest resistance to whatever they're doing. That's what happened with the Assembly Peace Act Committee. As soon as people paid attention to what they were doing, they folded. And a lot of people... based on public pressure, based on the winds, they'll go any way they want. London Breed's standing firm on this. It might cost her in the end of the day. I hate using that term, but it might cost her. But at least she's standing up for what she believes in, that this nonsense isn't working.
Where now all of a sudden you feel like we need to do something about this. And these are people who, again, have had problems with the police, have had addiction, have dealt with a lot of challenges. Some of them are in the community trying to help make changes. And they feel like there have been a lot of lines that have been crossed and we've let people get away with far too much. And they want to see us do something different. They want the police there. They want support. They want change. And they feel...
You go to any poor neighborhood, whether it's San Francisco or it's Los Angeles, and you talk to the actual residents who have to live near the encampments or live near drug dealers or any of that or the gang activity. They want the police there.
They want change, and they feel like things have gotten completely out of control more than they've ever experienced. So I think that's where, I go to for the advice on what to do is if you're living in it, it's a whole nother ballgame. If you can be distant away from it and you see it and you read it in the newspaper, you're like, oh, San Francisco, what's going on? Somebody needs to do something. But if you don't have to live in it every day, it's completely different. And that's why I'm not afraid to make the decisions I need to make. It's not about being political because I'm not afraid to lose my job. The voters of San Francisco have honored me with this privilege that I don't take lightly. But at the same time, I realize that the voters can decide that they may want someone else, and I will respect that, but I will still be here working my ass off to do everything I can to change and support this city.
Unless Gavin Newsom appoints her to be senator, which could happen. Here is London Breed being asked about the criticism that Republicans like Ron DeSantis give to San Francisco.
So San Francisco has become a conservative talking point about everything wrong with progressive governance. That they blame...
I just think the crime raps are really good, especially Oakland.
That they blame they blame wokeness, they blame defund the police, they blame progressivism, they blame liberalism. You've been mayor since 2018. Is in any way what you just described a situation that's sort of out of control, problems that have gotten worse? Do you feel like that in some ways these shifts that you're making now are an admission that what San Francisco and what your office has been doing over the past several years hasn't worked to solve some of these problems?
That question is very complicated because, to be clear, I think the perspective of what we did and what we actually did are two different things. So when we made changes at the time when George Floyd was killed, and there were so many people talking about Black Lives Matter this and Black Lives Matter that and saying they were investing money in the Black community, that really wasn't happening. But in San Francisco, we actually did invest $60 million annualized in the African American community for the Dreamkeeper Initiative, which is really changing lives with businesses, home ownership, and a lot of different things that are happening in San Francisco, specifically targeted at the African American community. So I'm really proud of that work, and it's happening in San Francisco.
Was that the money you took out of the police budget?
But the other thing...
She's pro-police now, but 2020 was a different story.
But the other thing is, we didn't get rid of our police officers. We took money from the police department.
Okay, she's admitting it. You know what? I'm going to give her that. She's admitting it, and she's being honest about it. That's more than a lot, because she absolutely flipped on this issue. She flipped in the right direction, so they get an attaboy. You gotta praise the politician when they do a good thing, and you gotta chastise them when they do a bad thing. Yes, am I comparing politicians to my dog? I am.
But the other thing is, we didn't get rid of our police officers. We took money from the police department. And now what we're also seeing is a need to make sure that there's a balance. Of course, we want, and I can speak to this from a perspective of the African American community that I grew up in. We want to be protected and safe in our communities, but we don't want the police to kill us. And I think at the end of the day, some of the things that...
Oh, yeah, she's one of those. I've been meaning to catalog it because she does it as much, if not more, than Adam Schiff. So we'll just make a note of this one.
At the end of the day, some of...
Oh, that's a good one, too. That's clean. So let me just, before I forget, let me save this. I got a drops folder that has like 150, 200 drops now. And then I go, London Breed at the end of the day. And we'll have an end of the day off with her and Adam Schiff at some point, because that is her tick. But it's okay. Let's keep going.
At the end of the day, some of the things that we've done in San Francisco to deal with reforms in the department and to highlighting the challenges and issues, we're going to keep moving in that direction. But
one of the challenges now is police have such a bad name because of the things that happened in 2020. It's been real hard to hire people. So you're seeing shortages in every major city in the state of California because, you know what? You get a lot less flack and probably the same money, and it's a less dangerous job to take an open position in a smaller department. You don't hear a lot of complaints from the Beverly Hills Police Department, even Santa Monica PD. It's a much easier job than, working with the LA County Sheriff's Department, working for the LAPD or even the SFPD. And there's kind of a hiring bonanza right now. And it's about to get even crazier because the LA Metro Board wants to create their own police force. And there are only so many people that want to do this job. It can be a lucrative job, but it's an incredibly dangerous job. And on top of that, there's not a lot of respect for it these days because of some of the nonsense that's been going on the last couple of years. So people are afraid to do that job. Why would you want to go in to work every single day serving the public when there's the public sentiment out there that half the public hates you? That doesn't make any sense.
But you can have justice, you can have fairness, you can have accountability, but we also want safety. And I think balancing that is really important. So to imply that...
Now remember, whenever she says accountability, that's the new magic word. Everyone's saying accountability, even Gavin.
I mean, it's not just about money. It's about damn accountability.
But they're not saying putting people in jail. So, yes, we support the police, but the other end of that is the criminals out there, you need to deal with them. And what we're doing right now is not dealing with them.
Imply that we went one way and now we're trying to go another way. That's not what we did. It's very complicated. And so I'm really proud of that work that we've done with the Dreamkeeper Initiative and how we've made a difference. And 3rd and Newcomb, for those of you who know San Francisco, a notorious corner in the Bayview Hunters Point. When I was growing up, there was a shooting on a regular basis. There are a whole bunch of businesses there. We paid for the build out. We've invested in the community. My friend who used to sell stuff out of his car, clothes and T-shirts, now has his own clothing shop. Another person who has a gym, a private gym there where she's working to help make a better community. It used to be a 50% vacancy rate there. It's now 10%. And there's...
It's better than downtown, which is 30.
Restaurants and offices and a rotary service. I mean, like a dry cleaner and a tailor, a guy who used to work for Neiman Marcus is making suits on the corner of Oakdale and 3rd Street where you can get some of the best suits anywhere in San Francisco.
She's doing an endorsement here.
And so the investments are making a difference, but at the same time, we still need to deal with the challenges around safety because a lot of things have gotten out of control. And I wouldn't blame that on the particular movement. I do think that we have to strike a balance, and that's what we're trying to do in San Francisco.
The pendulum swung one way. Now the pendulum's swinging the other way, but she'd like it to stop in the center, as we all would. London Bree was also asked about accountability.
Well, it just sounds like there's a lot of, these are layers of accountability and sort of checks and balances that have been put in place over years by Democrats to try to make sure that these systems protect the vulnerable, protect people that may not have as much power. But you're saying that a lot of times those are now standing in the way. It seems like that's a problem that's not just happening in San Francisco. That's a problem in Los Angeles. That's a problem in California writ large.
Yeah, I think sometimes something happens, and then to solve for a problem, we create a policy to solve for it. And sometimes over the years, those policies may or may not be necessary. I can give you an example, but it's kind of silly example. But well, I'll tell you anyway. So arcades in San Francisco. When arcades first started popping up, people in San Francisco, legislators, parents, everyone, they thought it was the end of civilization as we know it. And so they created all these laws where you can't have an arcade here, next to a school, next to a gas station, next to this. It was, I mean, I didn't even know this law existed until... That is absolute nonsense, but I love this story. I mean, I didn't even know this law existed until they were about to shut down Free Go Watch in the Haight-Ashbury community. And it was because of this law. And I thought, this is insane. But anyway, we got rid of the law. And the point that I'm making is, you know, sometimes we need to go back instead of creating new laws. How do we go back, get rid of old ones, or make things a lot better with some of the existing laws? And I think, you know, unfortunately in politics, with politicians who are trying to make a name for themselves, oftentimes it's like, yeah, let's do this. And you want to get credit for doing all this stuff. And it sounds good, but eventually that stuff piles up, and it's probably not always good for the city. And you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It would be there are some simple solutions. Yes, these are complex problems, but I'll tell you 3 things right now that would make things a little simpler for law enforcement, for law-abiding citizens, and for anybody having to deal with the criminal justice community. AB 109, Prop 47, Prop 57. These things have been devastating and have not worked. Let's get rid of those. Start off with something new. If you want to email us, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. David writes in, hey, Randy, don't forget the fire department also has a lot of shortages, and there are a lot of fire departments hiring throughout the state. People love firefighters. So if I had a choice, I'd choose being a firefighter over the police department because no one's ever heard of defund the fire department. That's true. Also an incredibly dangerous job, especially when 50% of all fire calls are for homeless encampments. But yes, there is, in fact, there are so many jobs available to work in the city and county of Los Angeles. We've got a massive labor shortage. So you want to get a job, whether it's the LAPD, the LA County Sheriff's Department, the fire department, garbage men. These are very good paying jobs, and we need them. So you're looking for a job and you're able-bodied, go do it. Johnny's away this week. It's Randy Wang here. You can always email us at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com, and you can follow me on the socials on Instagram and Twitter. I'm Randy Wang Radio. See the pictures I post of the foods that I make. Now, I've been sitting on this one for a couple days, but I was so excited when Karen Bass went on the Korean radio station because I got discovered that there was an English-speaking show that does news and politics on the Korean radio station here in Los Angeles when George Gascon went on it and made a fool of himself.
We got some Wallenese allies.
You know, at some point, we keep reaching out an invitation. At some point, Karen Bass might just say yes to coming on this radio station. Probably not. But since she did AM 1540 instead of AM 790, let's hear what she had to say. Here is what Karen Bass had to say about the ever-worsening homeless numbers.
So right now, let's go right into it. I think it seems like homelessness, that has been the biggest issue for probably the past decade, right? And you recently declared emergency on homelessness. It's 7 months in now, right?
That's correct.
Are we improving in this field?
I do think there have been some improvements, but the problem is so massive. It's going to take a while.
Well, 14,000.
That's optimistic.
Oh, you're so optimistic. It's going to take a while.
Well, 14,000 was the number, right, that you've housed so far.
14,000, that's right, in 6 months. But there's 46,000 on the street.
Actually, it's 48,000 now.
Yeah, it keeps on increasing.
Let me just tell you, I'm really worried about it continuing to increase. Why? Because of the COVID reliefs going away. I know right now, today, there are 3,000 evictions that are sitting at the courts. And now we know not all of those people will wind up homeless, but a number of them might. Mm-hmm. And that's just what's at the court today.
So are we supposed to never have evictions? Already the process is incredibly difficult. We'll get into a story tomorrow on just how difficult it is to kick out a tenant. But what is the answer here?
So we really have to look at it comprehensively. We got to prevent people from falling on the streets to begin with, falling into homelessness, get them off the streets as soon as possible, into housing, but also address what happened that led to them losing their housing to begin with.
And let's all not forget, as much as Karen Bass and Lindsay Horvath want to blame the increase in homeless numbers on evictions and people losing their housing, the numbers kept going up. They went up drastically, 10% in the city, 9% in the county, while there was still an eviction moratorium in the city and the county. No one was allowed to be kicked out of their housing, and the number still went up. And thousands of people died of overdoses in that population at the same time, and the number still went up. So they got to be coming from somewhere. Of course, she was also asked, isn't this really a drug problem? These guys are good.
What do you think about some people saying that a big portion of homelessness issue is caused by, for instance, drugs like fentanyl or methamphetamine? Is there some validity to that?
Absolutely.
How significant do you think that population is, the people that are homeless due to drug addiction?
Well, I think it is significant, but I also think that in many cases it's the chicken and the egg. Are you using drugs because you're on the street, or did you use drugs and that's what led to you being on the street?
I'm going to guess more often than not it's one than the other.
And so I think both things are true. At the end of the day, though, a significant...
Hey, she does it too. I got to save that.
At the end of the day, though...
Oh, boy, we're going to have at the end of the day off. I'm going to get a whole cast for Les Mis.
At the end of the day...
Just save that. I get so many presents for Johnny when he gets back from his cruise.
At the end of the day, though, a significant percentage of people on the streets are abusing substances or have mental illness, and the question is, which one came first?
Well, and the thing is, I understand there are absolute mental illnesses that, people just, there's no way to help them unless you institutionalize them. That does happen. But what we're seeing out here, the psychosis, even the schizophrenia, who are we kidding? We know so much of it is brought on by meth. That is a drug that destroys your brain every single time you use it. It's real hard to come back from that. So is it that there's a whole bunch of mentally ill people out there? There are. Or are there a whole bunch of people that became mentally ill because they were doing meth? Karen Bass, chicken or egg? She continues.
And then people who have been chronically homeless for years and years, sometimes they have difficulty coming inside. Mm-hmm. But, and when you see people and there's piles and piles of trash by the tent, some folks don't recognize that is a symptom of a mental illness. That's hoarding.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that, what has happened is that we have essentially decimated the social service safety net that used to exist. When you keep cutting services, these are the type of things that happen.
Okay. So it's not that we've got a pervasive drug culture. It's not that we have de facto legalized the hard drugs and have turned people into zombies. It's that we just didn't have enough services. Okay. Pretty sure we got plenty of those, but sure. When we come back, Karen Bass on Korean radio talks crime. That's kind of let's hear what Karen Bass has to say about crime on Korean radio.
We talked about safety. I've been a victim of I live in a pretty okay neighborhood too, but I've been a victim of about 4 break-ins to my car and also a robbery in my house.
Me too.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
These things are.
That's right. When they stole her guns.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
These things are. I've heard about that as well. the zero bail thing that's going on and all these, the lack of officers on the streets, is this driving crime, would you say? I mean, everywhere I go, I see that everyone's been a victim. Is this something that we're just supposed to get used to?
No, absolutely not. It is completely unacceptable. And the number one job I have as mayor is to keep LA safe. And so I'm a big believer in when crime happens, you do whatever it takes to stop it. But I'm a big believer in also investing in preventing crime from taking place in the first place.
That's right. What's really going to solve this problem is after-school programs.
That's why in talking about things like substance abuse and mental illness, because a lot of crimes like that are because somebody is addicted, crimes of opportunism like that. And so addressing those issues, while obviously if they catch the person that did it, then that person needs to be held accountable. So I've invested in...
Notice how she said accountable and not that person needs to go to prison, go to jail, be arrested. Because you can plead guilty to burglary over and over again, and you won't even spend a day in prison, won't spend a day in jail. It's happening all over the place thanks to AB 109.
So I've invested in both. We have an Office of Public Safety. I've invested in increasing the number of officers, increasing the wages, but also to deal with the morale issue, I've also been going around to the stations and talking to the officers to let them know that they have the support of the mayor's office. All of those things, I think, are important to deal with the morale. But when there is crime, we have to figure out how to stop it.
It's nice that she's paying lip service, but let's see what happens if we have a situation like with Luna in the sheriff's department, if she's going to back the police up and wait for context or she's going to throw them under the bus. That'll be the real test. There hasn't been one with the LAPD yet since she's become mayor, so we shall see. And we got enough time for this one. Police morale.
These issues, shortage of LAPD force is because the media has been pretty much bashing LAPD a lot, and the front page.
He's talking about the LA Times. The local news and TV and the radio does not bash the LAPD.
I think it's multiple factors. Let me just tell you something. Going around to the police stations, I've been shocked at the working conditions that the officers face. All of those things add into morale. Mm-hmm. I mean, things that literally are broken in the station and can't get fixed because of the city bureaucracy. So I've been trying to be aggressive and doing, because it's a culmination. The little things say you must not care very much about me if my living quarters, where I work, my working conditions are so poor.
Many of them are also leaving their neighborhood police force too, right? LAPD.
Well, you mean
they're lateraling out and then going to other stations or other cities.
Well, yeah, because number one, it's an easier job in some of these other cities.
That is true.
And
like Beverly Hills,
they can be offered more money.
Mm-hmm. Beverly Hills, you got to be like a college graduate. You got to do all this stuff. It's crazy.
Why wouldn't you be a Beverly Hills cop? She's actually being very honest there, and it is refreshing. At the end of the day, oh, God, I used it. She's better than Garcetti. It's the John Phillips Show. It's Randy Wang here on KABC.
I receive things on both ends.